Our speaker tonight is Ken Krawchuk. He's an information technology professional for 35 years, currently serving as Chief Technology Officer for Business Architects LLC, which is a consultancy he co-founded. He also holds 3 U.S. patents on connection-based architecture related to database theory and business process modeling, which I have no idea what that is. And he's also a freelance writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer and other publications, and a professional public speaker. He's a Philadelphia native, now living in Abington. He and his wife have 3 adult daughters and 1 granddaughter. In 1975, he earned his BS in physics from St. Joseph's University. In his spare time, he enjoys whitewater canoeing, camping, backpacking, and railroading. He also performs volunteer work for the Philadelphia Folk Song Society and WXPN Public Radio. He's going to be speaking to us tonight about the Pennsylvania Constitution, which is Pennsylvania's unsung legacy. Okay?
I would like to thank the Society for inviting me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. As I mentioned to John Hartman, I used to date a girl about 35 years ago, a little bit down the hill. I might have actually seen your monastery when it was still standing. I think all I saw was the Indian, Hermit's Rock, and the Dawson Pub when it used to be a Viper bar. But enough about me. A quick question. How many Pennsylvania natives do we have in the audience? Most of you. How many were taught the Pennsylvania Constitution in school? You need it. How many of you have read the Pennsylvania Constitution? A couple of you. Very good. How many, before you came here tonight, how many knew that we had a Pennsylvania Constitution? Just a couple of you. Do you see why I call it Pennsylvania's unsung legacy? It's a tune that nobody knows. Don't feel so bad, because I was once in the same position that you were. I never heard of the Pennsylvania Constitution until I was in my 40s. I found out in 1994 when I decided I was going to run for state representative. I figured, geez, if I'm going to run for the job, I should at least know what the job description is. So I sat down and read it, and I was amazed. I had no idea some of the things that were in there. I was in one of the debates, and none of my 3 opponents had ever read it, so I scored a couple of points there. And it's not just us who doesn't know that it's there. You go out to Google, and you type in the Pennsylvania Constitution, not many hits. Now, of course, you'll get copies of the Constitution, and some of the older ones as well. But in terms of history, 3 sites were all I saw. Only 3. Even Wikipedia has less than a screenful of information regarding the history of Pennsylvania's Constitution. Why do you think that is? Good question. We will get to that in a minute. First, we have to get some history. Historical Society, we've got to look at the history of Pennsylvania and how it came about. Of course, Pennsylvania started back in 1681 when King Charles II granted William Penn a charter to Penn's Woods, named not after William Penn, but after his father, Admiral William Penn. A year or so after William Penn came over, he sat down and wrote out what he called the frame of government. This was the quote-unquote holy experiment in self-rule, one of the most bold, the boldest experiments with self-government up to that point in the United States. He organized it a little bit differently than the way most people did. He set it up as a trust, not quite as a government, because he was the one to whom the king had entrusted the land. The elected officials, they were the trustees. They were the ones who were charged with making sure that his frame of government was properly carried out. Now, he tweaked it over the years. 1682 was the first one. 1683, he made some changes to it. Again, 1686 and 1701. But by then, he had all the bugs worked out, and Pennsylvania flowed smoothly. And he was in and out of the country several times. In fact, he passed away in 1718, I believe it was, 1719. My memory's not good for dates, so excuse me on that. But at the time, Pennsylvania just cruised along, and he held on to that frame of government all the way up to the Revolution. 2 weeks after the Declaration of Independence was signed, Pennsylvania was now a free nation. The first thing they needed was a constitution. And no less a luminary than Benjamin Franklin sat down with some of the prominent citizens of the state and wrote Pennsylvania's first constitution. It was based very strongly on William Penn's frame of government. And it went on. Benjamin Franklin became the first chief executive of Pennsylvania. He was not called a governor, he was called a president at the time. And he presided over Pennsylvania right on through up to his death in 1790. Now, his opponents could not wait for the man to die, because Benjamin Franklin had copied a lot of the good stuff out of William Penn's trust and brought it forward. And one of the most interesting was the method of amendment. This is the one they disliked the most, because the way it was done was by something called the Council of Censors. Those of you who are familiar with trusts know that the person who sets up the trust appoints trustees to keep an eye on the trust. The person who sets up the trust has the power of visitation, meaning he or she could always walk in and start examining the papers and take a look to see what's going on. They didn't like that. What they did, not 3 months after Benjamin Franklin died, they instituted a brand new constitution. They took parts of his, but they brought in a whole new constitution. Didn't even take it to the public. They just said, this is it, Constitution of 1776. Mr. Franklin died in April, new Constitution in September. It was that fast. The big thing that rankled them was, as I said, the Council of Censors, because every 7 years, they would have an election for the Council of Censors, and they would serve for 1 year. During that 1 year, they could summon people, compel testimony, they could subpoena papers, they could repeal laws that did not keep with the Constitution. And if something was so far off balance, they could call a constitutional convention to fix things. Now notice where this left the power, not in the hands of the legislature, but in the hands of an independent body. This was part of the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin. But that died with his death. And we came up with our second Constitution, which was a bit of a rewrite of the first, maintained quite a lot of the old one, but not the method of amendment. Over the years, there were more. In 1838, there was an amendment, changed it again, not very much, kept that amendment process. Then again in 1874 to align it with the changes to the United States Constitution after the Civil War. And Pennsylvania kept that Constitution for 75 years, up until 1968, which is about the time that I was hanging around this neighborhood. I didn't even know they were changing the Constitution. A lot of people don't even know it. But we got a new Constitution then, and that's the one we still have to this day. And it still has that same amendment process that was put in place by the opponents of Benjamin Franklin way back in 1790. Something else it has is Article 1, known as the Declaration of Rights. The Declaration of Rights precedes the United States Constitution's Bill of Rights, and it is much, much stronger. That is something that they could not touch, and it is kept word for word, virtually word for word, going all the way back to the first Constitution. What I would like to do tonight is I would like to walk through Article 1, Section 1, and maybe we can find out why our Constitution is such an unsung legacy. Right up front, starting off with Article 1, Section 1, there are 28 sections to it. Originally there were 26, it's grown a little bit, but I would like to start with Section 25, if I may. Let me read it for you. To guard against transgressions of the high powers which we have delegated, we declare that everything in this article is accepted out of the general powers of government and shall forever remain inviolate. Article 1 has been removed from the power of government. There are things that they can't touch. What do you think is in there? What a mystery. Let's start at the very beginning. Article 1, Section 1. All men are born equally free and independent, and have certain inherent and indefeasible rights, among which are enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and reputation, and of pursuing their own happiness. In a nutshell, you live your life your way. But over the years, we've drifted away from that. Your property is not always yours. For example, let's say you own the Dawson Street pub these days. Somebody is telling you, you can't allow cigarette smoking in there. Is that property truly yours if someone's dictating how you can use it? Some people like to spend their money at a bar, some people don't. Maybe you like to make a little gentleman's wager on a few sports games. However, that's now against the law too. Article 1 says you're allowed to enjoy your property. Doesn't include your money. And you get a little radical looking at this war on drugs. What about marijuana? If it took a constitutional amendment to ban alcohol, shouldn't it have taken one to ban marijuana? So Article 1, Section 1, right off the bat, is being violated. Maybe that's a clue to why they don't want you to see it. Gay marriage. There's another one. Living your life your way, for your own enjoyment. Do they have the power to ban gay marriage? It sounds not. Section 2. All political power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. For the advancements of these ends, they have at all times an inalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish their government as they may think proper. The people have the right to alter, reform, or abolish their government. That's a pretty heavy statement. If you ask any state legislator, do we have the ability to change our government? They say, well, you have initiative and referendum, but only when we tell you you have it. If you go to a judge, ask them, can we change our Constitution? Say, nope, the legislature has to initiate it. Well, excuse me, Article 1, Section 2 says the people have that right at all times. Where did that right go? I don't know. Section 5, this one strikes me to the heart. All elections shall be free and equal. One thing that wasn't mentioned in my introduction is that in 2002, I was the Libertarian candidate for governor of Pennsylvania. I ran against Ed Rendell and Mike Fisher. In order to get his name on the ballot, Ed Rendell needed 2,000 signatures. Mr. Fisher needed 2,000 signatures. I needed 21,026. Does that sound equal? And it got worse. In 2006, I was planning to run for U.S. Senate against Rick Santorum and Bob Casey. Mr. Santorum needed 2,000 signatures. Mr. Casey needed 2,000 signatures. I needed 67,000, more than 33 times as many. Is that equal?
Couldn't you show them that paper?
They knew it.
I have here a copy of the Constitution. In fact, I made a federal case out of it. I took it to the Supreme Court of the United States, all the way up. I wanted a judge to say, no, that law violates the Constitution. But we went to the district court, and it was the same judge who did that intelligent design decision a few years ago, if you recall.
Yeah.
Same judge. I thought, hey, an intelligent man is going to make an intelligent choice. But he said, no, that's equal. That's okay. So we appealed it to the circuit court. The circuit court said, no, that's equal. That's okay. Up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, that's equal. This year, this past year, for the presidential election, the number was 28,000. And next year, if I'm thinking of running, we're guessing it's going to be about 30,000. Not equal. Hit me in the heart. And now all I can do is lobby to have the laws changed, which I'm working on. So much for Section 5. You want to hear Section 6?
No.
It gets worse. Section 6. Trial by jury shall be as heretofore. A simple wording that conceals a lot of history. Yes, sir?
Are these judges permanently applied, or do they have to be elected? elected.
He's
The ones
perfect.
that said you can't, that is legal, are those little judges that have to be elected to office, or are they permanently assigned to the office?
These were federal judges, and they're appointed,
Yeah.
so there's not much we can do about it.
So they're,
Pennsylvania judges have already ruled that it's okay. Pennsylvania judges said the reason why it's okay is it prevents ballot clutter. So what they're trying to do is limit your choices at the ballot box, and people wonder why nobody votes.
Another term.
That's right. New Jersey has a lot. California has, in Iraq, they had 104 candidates. Now, are the Iraqis smarter than the American people? Don't get me started. Too late. Section 6, trial by jury shall be as heretofore. Little piece of history. When they say as heretofore, one piece of it comes to us from Admiral William Penn, way back when. He was very critical of the king. He and his Quakers. I'm not sure how much Quaker history you know. But the king was very annoyed that Admiral Penn would go out there and criticize the king. He had him locked up in the Tower of London, held at trial, and the jury refused to convict him. They said, no, he's allowed to criticize the king. The king said, no way, and he locked the jury in the Tower of London with William Penn. And he kept them there, but the people got annoyed. There were protests, there were demonstrations, and eventually the king had to capitulate to the pressure. And he let William Penn go, and he let the verdict of the jury stand. And what Admiral Penn did is he gave us a new right under the English common law called jury nullification. You as a juror, you don't only have the right to say whether or not someone has broken the law. You're not just questioning the facts. You have the right to question the law. And if the law is no good in your mind as a juror, you can find the person innocent no matter how guilty the evidence may make him appear. Just like with Admiral Penn. This was used during the Prohibition era of America because prosecutors were finding it increasingly difficult to find a jury who could convict someone of alcohol possession. And this is happening today in Kentucky, West Virginia, the Upper South area there, believe it or not, with marijuana growing. It's the biggest cash crop in the state. And the prosecutors are finding it difficult to get a conviction for possession of marijuana now because of jury nullification. So anybody who's on a jury, the judge is only giving you half of the instructions. The other half is you can judge the law as well. Section 7. Every citizen may freely speak, write, and print on any subject. Freedom of speech. It's what makes America great. But guess what? Try to grow your own cigarette tobacco in your backyard and sell it on TV. They'll say, no way. Distill your own spirits in your basement and try and sell it on the radio? Can't do it. Now you may say, I don't smoke, I don't drink. Well, I bet a lot of you own a house. If you're putting an ad in the paper to sell that house, there are certain words they don't allow you to use. You can't say, quiet neighborhood. You can't say, a good family house, because you will run afoul of the Fair Housing Act. What happened to our free speech? One after the other. They just vanish. There are some in the papers here. We're up to Section 8. There are 28 sections. I'm not going to go through all of them. Some of them they're not violating, like the one about quartering troops in your house. They're not doing that.
Yeah. Patriot Act. Oh, yeah. You should read that one.
Yeah, be here next month. We'll talk about that. Recent history. Section 8. The people shall be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and possessions from unreasonable searches and seizures. How many would stop by the police and have them search a car? A couple of us.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to do that. It says it right here. In fact, that ability to search a car goes beyond that. Let's say, sorry. That's the Fourth Amendment of the Federal Constitution. They're called the state constitution. The numbers don't quite line up. In fact, the Federal Constitution was modeled to a large part against the Pennsylvania Constitution. There are some parts of it that are word for word right out of the Pennsylvania and Virginia constitutions. Good point. There's a man who knows his constitution.
The way the cop justifies it, he says that you're under a state license to have that car, so the car is actually state property in terms of any legal thing that they want to do. And that's how they get around it.
Yes and no, and I'm gonna get to that in a minute. That's actually the next
At least that's
the next issue. Let's deal with section 8, about being secure in your possessions. Let's say you lend a car to a friend, and they go out to a concert down at the Spectrum, or wherever it is they go for concerts these days. Spectrum's gone away. And one of his friends is in the back seat. Let's pick on marijuana again. Who drops a marijuana cigarette on the back, somewhere on the floor in the back seat? Next day, you could be driving to work, and a cop could pull you over for something innocent. If he sees that joint in the back of your car, he can seize your car on the spot. No judge, no jury, no trial, nothing. They can take your car, your house, your life savings, everything, and you'll never see a judge. They call it asset forfeiture. I call it highway robbery, literally, right out of your car. Where did that right go? To be secure in your person's possessions. Went somewhere. Section 9. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused has the right to be confronted with witnesses against him. Unless, of course, the witness is one of those red light cameras up on Roosevelt Boulevard. What happened to that right? Gone. He cannot be compelled to give evidence against himself unless you're at a sobriety checkpoint. The officer said, blow up the balloon, please. And what if he comes up and he says, give me your license, can I see your license and owner's card? You, under section 9, are not required to testify against yourself. You could ask the officer, if I had such things, could you use them against me? Well, yeah, of course I can. I refuse to incriminate myself. I don't have to do that. You don't need to show them your driver's license. You don't have to have a driver's license. And Pennsylvania has no law requiring that you identify yourself to a police officer. What happened to that right not to incriminate yourself? Section 12. I skipped a couple here. A couple of them that they're not violating yet. No power of suspending laws shall be exercised unless by the legislature or by its authority. Are there any lawyers in the room? I have here a copy of Pennsylvania Rules of Court. Everybody should have one of these. This is your key to the courtrooms. This is how the courts operate. It's not a big book, not a lot of information. But at the end of every section, acts of assembly suspended. The following acts of assembly are suspended insofar as they apply to the practice and procedure and actions in equity to the extent hereinafter set forth. 1. Section 7 of Act 11 of April 11, 1929, Pamphlet Law 488, number 205. And there's a big long list of the acts of the legislature that are superseded. Where did they get that right? Especially when Article 1 says they can't do it. Yes, sir.
Is that book available at all public libraries?
That I don't know. I bought my own. This one's a 1996 version. It hasn't.
Well, shouldn't that be mandatory? Something basic as that in the library? If we can tax
In hardback.
You guys are way ahead of me. You're ahead of me on the license. You're ahead of me. I'll be getting to that too. This is scary stuff. Yes, sir.
That book is so powerful because it was adapted by the Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 10C.
Ah, but 10C is not part of Article 1. Article 1 says these things are removed from the power of government forever. 10C does not apply. And actually it says that right here. Article 5, Section 10C of the Constitution of 1968. It's superseded. It's superseded because it is not in Article 1. Article 1 is things are removed forever, unless forever has come today. This book, since they're superseding laws, says that forever has come today. Used to be a name of an old Supreme song. I digress again. A good book. Where was I? I was in section 12. 13. No excessive fines imposed, except for asset forfeiture, where they take everything that you own. It also goes into unaudited accounts that the Attorney General's in charge of, but we won't go there. Section 15. No special criminal tribunals to try a particular class of cases. Who remembers a couple years ago at Veterans Stadium when they instituted sports court to try rowdy sports fans. We can't do that. It says it can't. Section 21, my favorite. The right of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. Does anybody have any question what that might mean? When I was running for governor, Mr. Rendell was suggesting we limit gun purchases to one a month. I asked him on national television, I said, who are you going to betray? Your friends in the anti-gun lobby, or your oath to uphold the Constitution? He smiled at me and he said, I think we can have some reasonable restrictions on gun laws. Can you see why this is unsung? There's more. I can go into more, but I think I've rattled everybody enough. This is political dynamite. If everyone knew this, where would it go? If people read their constitutions, if they studied it. Do you know, none of us were taught the Constitution, the state constitution in school. The curriculum in Pennsylvania is controlled by the unelected Board of Education in Harrisburg. They're all appointed. They say what gets taught, what doesn't get taught, how long it gets taught, who does the teaching, who can't do the teaching. They come up with the curriculum, they come up with the certification process for teachers, and in all of that, do you think they would tell the kids how their government operates?
Are you nuts?
You should be standing here alongside of me. It's dynamite. They can't do this. That's why it's this unsung legacy. And it's not just with the kids, it's elsewhere. I have copies for everybody, a copy of the Pennsylvania Constitution. I'll be passing them out once we're done here. When I got these from my state representative, they give them out for free. And I asked, I said, can I get a couple dozen copies? I'm going to be doing a presentation for the Pennsylvania Constitution, and I'd like to have it. And he said to me, what qualifications do you have to talk about the Constitution? I'm a citizen, a Pennsylvania citizen, born and raised. What qualifications do I have? This is the best kept secret in the state. Yes, sir.
In regards to the Board of Education there that are appointed, that's only regarding public education. So a private school has a certain degree of leeway as to deciding their own curriculum.
That's true. Not meaning to disagree with you, I'm going to have to disagree with you. Currently, it's about 92% of Pennsylvania's kids are taught in the government school system. Now, if anybody else did that, that would be called a monopoly and they'd be shut down.
The Sherman Antitrust Act.
Well, that's federal. We're just talking about it even on the state level. It's about 7.5%, right around there, so 92, 93%. Of that 7%, well, let me tell you, when I was running for governor, I focused on the schools. That's where I started giving this speech, was in the schools. Because when you ask kids, how many of you were subject to an unreasonable search in the last couple of months, half the hands went up. And the kids are getting right in the face sometimes. But I would ask the same question. How many of you are being taught the Pennsylvania Constitution? And the answer was the same answer that I was getting here. None. When I asked how many of you have read it, God bless them, there were a couple who raised their hand here and there. I should have counted, but there couldn't have been more than 50 out of thousands and thousands and thousands. It's a bleak situation. We have a lot of rights that government can never take away. They're somehow gone away. So what do we do with that? Well, it starts with point number one. We should all sit down and read our Constitution. As I said, I have copies for everybody. Sometime when you got a little bit of time, it doesn't take long to get through it. It's not a big book. Settle down with a nice warm cup of tea in front of the fire, out on the porch on a nice night, sit down with a beer, whatever it is you like. Assuming is it still legal?
So far.
I hope so. I hope so. And read through it. That's step one. Step two is you have to follow up on the Constitution. And what follows from the Constitution? That's the law. Learn the law. You get a parking ticket, challenge it. It's a cheap education. You don't have to go to law school. I've never been to law school. I've made it all the way up as far as the Supreme Court of the United States. just because I have the tenacity to do it. Learn the law. It can't be that difficult, otherwise lawyers wouldn't be able to do it, right? But it really is up to you. You have to learn the Constitution. You have to learn the law. And then you've got to hold to the fire, the feet of any politician who dares to ignore a single word of it. You have to remember the mantra of the grassroots activist. It's easy to remember. 10 words, 2 letters each. If it is to be, it is up to us. My fellow citizens, I'm leaving it up to you.
Thank you.
Any questions before I sit down?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is there any other states where their constitutions are respected and have more power than the federal constitution?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is I don't see people having a lot of respect for the federal constitution either. For example, where, and I have my federal constitution right here next to my heart, where in here does it authorize the president to bail out car companies, or give $1 trillion to Wall Street, or control education? Thousands of things. There are just thousands of things. It's not in there. Every time I hear what they're doing, they're violating the Constitution left and right. And let me not just pick on Mr. Obama, let me also pick on Mr. Bush. He started the war. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 says Congress has the power to make war, not the president. There's very little respect for this document. There are a few good guys in there, but don't get me started on the federal Constitution.
Does the federal constitution have priority over the state constitution? And if there was a city constitution, would that have priority over the state constitution?
Well, let me answer that in stages. The cities, boroughs, and townships of Pennsylvania are creatures of the Constitution, of the state Constitution. It says in there how counties are formed, how cities of the first class, second class, third class are formed. So Philadelphia is controlled by this Constitution. In fact, there's a whole section on Philadelphia courts in there. Now, your second question has 2 answers. The states were sovereign nations. In 1776, when Benjamin Franklin wrote that document, Pennsylvania was a nation. Separate, distinct, complete. So is New Jersey, New York, Virginia, including the West Virginia part. All of them were separate nations. They banded together, and they gave the federal government 17 powers. And they're enumerated in Article 1, Section 8. The power to coin money, the power to make war, to post roads, to maintain a navy and an army. 17 things. They delegated these powers to the federal government, but they retained their sovereignty. So the states were above the federal government and answerable to the federal, and answerable to the state. The federal government was. The Civil War was flipped around. One thing that most people aren't aware of is that the states' rights concept, which was one of the main concepts of the Civil War, slavery was one of them, but states' rights was the legal underpinning of the argument. States' rights lost, and the federal government conquered the states. And from that point going forward, the federal government was on top. So now if there's something in the state constitution which conflicts with the federal constitution rules. However, if something is done only in that state, then the state constitution rules. For example, in Montana, not a month ago, they declared that all machine guns made in the state and transported in the state and used in the state, since they never crossed state lines, they are not subject to the federal laws. And they're basing that on the 10th Amendment of the federal Constitution. So, used to be that the states were in charge. They were conquered in the Civil War, but now they're relying on the 10th Amendment to come back. And I heard there are 2 other states which have issued similar proclamations. And real ID, the federal government is forcing the states to get standardized driver's licenses, which is essentially a national ID card. Many states have said, no, we're not going to do it. Pennsylvania is currently looking at a bill saying, no, we're not gonna do it. So, it's a complex answer. Yes, sir?
Now, when the federal government makes an agreement with the United Nations, then if the local borough is in violation of this agreement, then the United Nations can come all the way down through the chain of command and say, you can't do that.
I have heard that. I have not seen that. However, legally speaking, essentially you're correct. But I think they're treating that with kid gloves, because if the UN came in and said, we're going to take over the Walnut Street Golf Course, which they talk about doing, not that particular piece of land.
So the corporations can function equally throughout the world.
Back talk.
That's okay.
All right?
I think maybe we should get together afterwards and have a little conversation. Manners, what he's talking about. Yes, sir?
In regards to that Montana law and machine guns, now you're talking about select fire, which means full auto,
Correct.
and that was outlawed in '68. There were 3 amnesties that Congress enacted. They've only used one of them. 2 of them are still in the books. They're afraid. They expected like 20 to 40,000 weapons to come forth. In the first week, 200,000 weapons showed up from as far back as the First World War. They could not believe that people had all these full auto weapons.
Wow. I didn't know that number. That's
Yeah,
surprising.
the federal government was not interested in the Thompson machine gun, but the mob was. And so they had them years before the federal government had them, and that's where they all went.
Interesting.
But if that's the case, then that an automatic weapon that's manufactured in the state, used by a state citizen, and and never crosses state lines, I mean, that's flying in the face of, BATF.
Correct.
How does that stand?
Well, look at it from the point of view of the people in Montana. There's no legal basis for that doing. It's like the United States government saying, France, you're going to start paying our income tax. Well, first the French must say, oh, we don't have to pay nothing. Bonjour. Ça va. Because they have no authority. The 10th Amendment says they have no authority within the state. Prime directive, if any Trekkies are out there. I'm a big Trekkie.
But Montana is one of those states where they always have trouble with survivalists.
Correct.
And there's always some FBI, CIA, BATF standoff, like Waco.
Randy Weaver.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's a lot of called rebellion going on against Washington. It started with the medical marijuana movement. There are now, I lost count, over a dozen states that have passed medical marijuana things. And thank God, President Obama did something right. He says, I think we're back off of that one. It's like, woo!
And he's got enough to worry about.
That's true. Yes,
Is
ma'am?
there anything in the Pennsylvania Constitution about eminent domain?
Unfortunately, there is.
There is?
Yes.
Oh.
It says it can be done, but you have to make just compensation for the land. The problem with that is the United States Supreme Court, I think it was about a year and a half ago, in the Kello decision, they said that local municipalities can seize land under the eminent domain power, even if it's being given to a private developer. It was up in Connecticut where they took somebody's house and gave it to a private developer to develop the land. I forget if they put a hotel there and a few other things like that. The rationale was it's good for government because it increases the tax base. So the message is, your house is no longer your castle. They can take it and,
Yeah.
and do you know why they can do that?
Come on.
We're running out of
Because we don't know that we have the right to tell them no. We don't know how to go about it. All you need for Pennsylvania are these 2 books. And you can tell them you know what.
What if they change them, like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
do?
And they do try that.
Yeah.
As I said, this only goes back to
Without
19
telling us.
This only goes
Yeah.
back to 1968. And the big difference between this one and the 1875 Constitution, they updated some wording, but the big difference is that the section on the courts tripled in size. It got all kinds of detail, and that kind of detail does not belong in the Constitution. This is supposed to be a framework, not the law. This even tells you how you discipline judges. None of that should be in there. That's the stuff of law, not the stuff of the Constitution. Scary. And that's where your tendency came from. Yes, sir? Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's all right. No, I was wondering, they have tried to make amendments though, right? To the original.
They did.
They did.
They have. The most recent one was to allow children to testify via video instead of face-to-face. So that was one change that they added, and that's actually taking away a right. The right of the
But
accused. Suppose you're accused, I'm not saying you did this, but so if you're accused of doing something to a child, you now no longer have the right to face your accuser. You've lost the right there. That was something that was supposed to be ours forever, and they nibble away at it, little by little. Eventually it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the way asset forfeiture went, and it's still getting bigger.
So this goes before, say somebody wanted to raise an amendment to that. That would be passed in Harrisburg, would have to pass both houses, right?
Correct, and it has to pass both houses twice.
Twice.
In 2 sessions. So one house has to pass it, an election has to go by. They gotta pass it again, and then it gets passed to the people, and the people have to approve it.
They have to vote.
And that is the amendment process that goes back to 1790 that the enemies of Benjamin Franklin put in place. You guys are good, these are great questions.
Essentially, they'll change a law for the greater good, as it were. But if there's a greater movement on the ground, is it possible to prevent that, or for the greater movement on the ground to change the law and/or the Constitution? I mean, you have enough votes, you have enough people. There's only a handful of politicians, but there's a ton of us.
That's true, and we are stronger than they can possibly imagine. But what you've got to do, sir, is you've got to get up. Did you ever run for
Yeah.
public office?
No, I'm not a politician.
Who's run for public office? I'm not a politician either. I haven't broken a promise yet. When I break a promise, you can call me a politician. We have here in America what's called self-government. You, yourself, have to get up and do it. To quote Robert Heinlein, the great science fiction author, you have to pay attention day in and day out. It's like driving a car through heavy downtown traffic. Because if you don't pay attention, somebody's going to drive your car into a ditch or crash into somebody else. And according to what he says, when that happens, don't blame them. Blame yourself because you chose to sit in the back seat and snooze. That's why I've got my 10-word mantra. If it is to be, it is up to us. Or, if you're talking to yourself, it is up to me. That's why I decided I was going to run for office in 1994 when I first ran. Because I thought, I have no right to complain unless I get up there and do something about it. I joined Toastmasters International to learn how to speak in public. Conquered my fear of standing in front of people. I used to be scared to death to do this. Not anymore. I'm a lot more comfortable with this.
I just have a question that we as little people, well, not everybody, myself. You say Mr. Bush caused the war, started that war, and yet it's not constitutional.
Correct.
So how do you expect a little person that's stopped by a plain old policeman can refuse to show them their license? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Well,
You're telling us that we have to fight for something,
yes.
but Mr. Bush could very easily, nobody objected to. Now, I mean, I voted for Mr. Bush, I'm sorry to say, but.
I voted for first.
But I'm just saying that, making that comparison, I don't see how you're, I mean, I'm absolutely depressed now. What you're doing.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm
I mean,
wrong.
my home could just be taken from me for.
Yes.
The government feels like.
And your children. The county could take your children from you.
But I mean, but you take the president of the United States could do something, and there was nobody powerful enough to stop him.
So I can merge your question with his and say, again, it's up to you. You need to learn. Learn the Constitution, learn the law. Because once you know it, it's empowering. For example, I was once stopped by the Coast Guard. I had my canoe out in Lake Erie. Stupid thing to do. I got back. When I came back, the Coast Guard starts asking me all these questions. What's your name? What are you doing here? Where do you live? What's your household income? I said, am I required to answer these questions? Always be polite. Just ask the question. Am I required to answer the question? He said, well, I need to fill out this form. Very nasty with me. I said, oh, I'm sure you do, but am I required to participate? He said, well, let me go ask my chief. He went away and he never came back. I know people who have done this with regular policemen. You get stopped, maybe they don't have a driver's license, maybe there's no plate on their car. It's the same thing. Ask questions. Be polite. Stand on your rights. I don't understand. Article 1, Section 1. Carry it with you. I always have one in my car.
Carry it with you, right?
Show me. Show me. What page is it on? I got it right here. Help me, officer. I don't understand.
I have 2 cars, can I have 2 copies?
You can have them all. Give them to your friends. Because we still have a moral government in this country. With all the problems we've got, and somebody may disagree with me on that, they still follow the law. And they're afraid that if they do the wrong thing, they're going to wind up in trouble. And they do. And they will. Occasionally, you'll find an officer or some official who's chastised for something that they did. But it requires you to call them on it. If it is to be, it is up to us.
I just want to say that Harry Truman never lost an election. And my favorite quote by him is that the only thing that's new is the history we don't know.
Yeah.
It's pretty much in a nutshell.
That's true, and it's up to us to write that history. What a wonderful thing for a historical society to do.
Good, I'm trying to do it too.
Run for office, it's easy. You know, this year is the best year to do it because the lowest level office is up for election this year. The judge of elections and the inspector of election positions. They serve at your local precinct. They work 2 days a year. Are there any poll workers here?
I'm a judge of election.
There you go. She is on the second lowest rung of the ladder. God bless you, man. You're upholding our republic.
Well, I'm going to say something you're talking about. Don't you think that the people are apathetic? They don't come out and vote? I mean, I worked this time, and you know we only had 59 people out of 400 and something.
It was very low.
Very discouraging, I think. But then when we do have the election, they'll be complaining about people that are voting.
Are you running for re-election this year?
No, I'm an appointed judge.
Oh, you're in Philadelphia.
You're one of the appointments.
Me. Well, do you know what you can do? Contact your state rep, get a boatload of these, and as each person comes in,
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
You won't have
That's
that
very
knowledge.
good. Bring them to the next meeting.
and if you're not in Philadelphia, out in the suburbs, this year the judge of elections in charge of the polling place is elected, and there are 2 inspectors of election. They have to be from different political parties. If you see a blank, nobody running on a slot, write in your own name. Don't laugh. I know people who won with 1 or 2 votes only. 1 vote, I won. Nobody else voted. You can do it. This is self-government. You can do it yourself. Politicians ain't too smart. You could do better than them. Who couldn't do better than a politician? Raise your hand. Your hands aren't up, are they?
I have a question though,
Sure.
when you have a chance.
Sure.
The Pennsylvania rules of court, when one wants to represent himself pro se, and if the judge rules against that rule, you can violate into the rules of judicial conduct. But when you go in front of a federal judge, who can you report to a federal judge of violations of conduct?
My apologies, sir, I don't know that answer. I'm a state guy. I've run for governor, I've run for state representative, things like that. I tend not to do things on the federal level. I feel like I don't have enough clout. So my federal experience is limited only to my challenge, which went up the line. I'm sure there are procedures. I do not have a copy of the federal rules of court. I can go to the law library. There's one in Norristown, in the basement of the courthouse. It's free, it's open to the public. There's a group called NOLO, N-O-L-O, who has legal self-help books, teach you how to use a law library. It's not difficult. Yes,
In
ma'am.
Philadelphia, the county law library is Jenkins Law Library, and it's in Will Gimbel's building, and it is open to the public.
Thank you very much. And you know, of the 3 websites on the entire World Wide Web that talk about the history of the Pennsylvania Constitution, they are one of them.
How about that?
Must be a very good group of people there. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that one of the most empowering days I ever had was the day I stood up against a ticket that I was charged with reckless driving. I didn't hit anybody, I didn't hit the trees, I didn't hit the police officer that was coming out the wrong coming out the street. I didn't hit anything, and I ended up in court arguing on my behalf, and I walked away. The only one the judge said, not guilty. And I felt so strong, because I had been to 2 sessions, and both of the people in the court had said, you know, plead down to a misdemeanor, or plead down to this, you won't get any points, you only have to pay a fine, blah, 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 blah.
Not the law.
Well, guess what? I was gonna lose my license if I did that.
Mhm.
It ended up that I was fighting for my license. It was awful. It was the worst 3 months of my life.
I'll tell you,
And actually, it was 6 months, yeah,
I
it did.
I have to be honest, I lose more than I win. But boy, when you win, you come out of there,
It did, it felt really good.
good for you. That's what it takes.
It was
You guys have a
scary, it
reason.
was scary as hell.
Well, that's why you become a Toastmaster. You learn to do these things. If you're a Toastmaster, you learn to be more comfortable in a public situation. One of my speeding tickets, they said, put your hand on the Bible. Do you promise, raise your hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, help you God? No. They looked at me, what do you mean no? I have rights secured by the Constitution, and I do not waive them. The clerk looked daggers at me, and the judge said, you're quite right. You don't have to say that if you don't want to. He looked at her. But it takes courage to do that. Courage. You have to have courage. Otherwise, they're just going to keep snipping it away. First of all, they put up one red light camera, Grant Boulevard, right up by my mom's house. Then all of a sudden, they're all up and down the entire boulevard. Next thing you know, there's going to be one in front of your house, and they're going to have one in
There's
your
going to
living
be
room.
one at Walnut Lane and Henry Avenue.
Yep, that's what they said.
And you know why?
Why is that?
Because in a 12-hour period, over 100 people ran the light.
Yeah.
So why don't they place an officer there?
Too
Oh,
much
because
money.
they would get
Have the library open, how are they gonna pay them for an officer?
You know how much does a camera cost
There-
compared to
there's
an
the-
officer?
Have a police
24
Camera's
hours.
a lot cheaper.
Grant's camera's a lot cheaper, but you've lost one of your rights. Another thing
That's
they
a
do,
good one.
I'd rather see them get the
But
guys
there's too
going
many
through the
people
light.
violating that right
Yeah.
also.
that's right, what they're doing
How do we
is,
stop them?
they're not doing as well as they could. You let the bums out. One of you people is gonna run for Pennsylvania, for Philadelphia mayor. See your show of hands, who's gonna run for Philadelphia mayor?
Yeah.
City council. You gotta do it, otherwise they're gonna keep on doing that.
So as an alternative to that, rather opposed to putting up the camera, is it not impossible to get a volunteer group who will volunteer their time and watch that intersection? And
Yes.
then make note of all of this stuff, get
Guardian-
the license.
Guardian angels,
The
whatever
Guardian
they-
Angels, and we had a state militia, and that's when the First Amendment, the Second Amendment is a well-ordered militia shall not be denied the right to keep and bear
Yeah, but
arms.
that group would have to make 100 apperances every day in court.
But that's what they would be doing.
That's what
That's what they
that's what their
volunteered to
job
do.
They need 10,000 people.
Well, we've gotta start somewhere.
I don't use the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment is too many. I like the right to bear arms shall not be questioned. Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
Well, I'm taking the adverse side of it. We didn't put one camera up until at least 12 people were killed on the boulevard.
And that's a terrible
And
thing.
if you had,
In my mom's
the
neighborhood-
militia out there, idiots would mow them down. Like, what's, you know,
That's true.
challenge them?
Exactly.
Abington Township had the same situation. We have no cameras in Abington Township, and as long as I live there, they won't have one, believe me. They know who I am. But what they did do is they put up these signs that measure your speed. Your speed, this changes the
Yes.
numbers in it. You know what the local kids were doing? They were trying to see how fast they could get them to go. One guy, I got it up to 90 miles an hour on a regular back street. I said, I went up there, I said, get rid of the signs, they're $10,000 a piece, those signs. I said, take an old cruiser, police cruiser that doesn't work anymore, park it there.
Yeah.
People aren't gonna go flying 90 miles an hour past a cruiser. First of all, there's no, what do they call it, a attractive
What
nuisance
did you need?
to make the kids wanna do it. And second of all, if there's no cop there, they're not gonna react. Who's gonna speed by an empty cop car? What it's gonna take is people who have common sense, who don't wanna see a 13th person get killed on the boulevard, especially when it's 2 blocks from my mom's house. They should put a cop there, because that's what this document says they should do. You have the right to confront your accuser. Well, here it is, it's Kodak.
Well, you get it right if you confront the picture that they send you with your car going through the light.
You know, I know somebody who followed up based upon that. They said, you got a picture of my car, how do you know it was me? They said, oh, we'll schedule you for a hearing next week, you get the notice. She never got the notice. I think if you stand up to them, they're gonna collapse. I'm waiting, because I go by there all the time, it's right by my mom's house. I'm just waiting, someday, picture's gonna come in the mail. And I'm gonna have a fun day. Yes, sir.
Usually, many times, the solution to many things are extremely simple. Typical boulevard, set the stupid lights that you maintain a 25 or 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, and you go right on up without stopping. I don't have to speed. I just set the remote control and just keep on trucking.
That's right.
But that would be too much like what? Doing, using your brain, maybe?
Doing the right thing.
Reminds me of an old Popeye cartoon.
Especially with the cost of gas.
That's
But
right.
we worried about the lights and the cops and the whatever.
You should run for office.
Don't you really?
I haven't heard you say anything wrong yet.
You don't want to.
I'm surprised you haven't read your
I
Constitution.
get busy.
Anybody else have a question? Anybody else asked a question yet?
You have to admit that cameras have saved a lot of lives.
Yes.
I
Solved a
agree.
lot of crimes.
Absolutely, I agree that it has.
They
too.
take a picture of
There's-
more than they
By the same token, there are a lot of people that Social Security has helped out. However, Social Security is not the Constitution either. Good ends do not justify evil. If you swore an oath saying, this is what I'm gonna do, and then you turn around and you do something else, you're spitting on the flag.
Yeah, Adolf Hitler got all the trains to run on time.
Yes.
I'm gonna give you a tool. We don't solve problems, we create industries,
Good way of looking at it.
okay? So if you look at solving problems and not creating an industry, set the timing of the lights that it's threaded, and then you don't have to have $1 million cameras in court systems and whatever, but that's an industry, so
It don't work that way.
you
You can drive 35 miles an hour, but the guy's still gonna go 60 to get to the next
not
red
like
light.
that's, you're gonna justify your
Yeah,
insanity like
you'll
that.
go.
I think they need more cameras. They have to change the public driving habits. Everybody goes through all the stop signs now. Nobody stops at the stop sign. Nobody.
Nope.
And red lights, they're starting to treat the same way.
You know, a coworker of mine, he's from India. He says he can't believe how much people ignore the law here. And it's not just the people, it's the police. The police will say, yeah, you ran that stop sign, but you know what? I'll let you go to work. He says in India, if you break the law, boom, you pay the penalty.
They cut off your hand.
All right, I'm told my time is out. Listen, you've been a very good audience. I love your questions. Very, very intelligent people. You're the kind of people who should be running this country. If it is to be, it is up to.
Thank you.
I like the news. Thank you all very much.
Help yourself to refreshments.
I have about twice as many constitutions as I need, so if anybody wants two, by all means.
I'm putting it in my bag.
Thank you, sir.
Can I have one?
Well, the one time I did get stopped for speeding, and I said, I wasn't doing that. He said, look, lady, you don't stop talking.
Yes.
Right here.
So, shut up.
What are you going to do?
So, imagine how happy she would have been. I said, I'm going to show you the best.
He's always talking about the government's control. He's going to tell you, that was the box. He says, like, he said, no, after you get the box, you go to the table and yeah. It's also, everybody's down the street, it just says, nice seeing you. Are you ready to die? Are you ready? That was good.
I think Cheney is much better than White. We don't let him go.
I'm in favor of the lights.
Right?
Why don't you get
We
off
should have
of
been
one?
out of there 2 years. Should have been out of there. When you do get out of there, you're still going to have Shiites and they're going to kill each other anyway. So, you should have,
Some of them were,
people staying out, catch them,
people went back.
and get out of there.
People had to discuss it back.
Now you're trying to get out of there, now you got French got their ass kicked in Vietnam. As soon as you leave, they're going to kill everyone. They're going to kill each other. Let them do it now. I got my soapbox.
Wait a minute.
So that's what he got it from. He got it from, and he made sure that I got it. That's why the United States can't take it. And I don't think, you were saying about Montana, I think it specified fully automatic weapons. I think what they said was, they wanted any firearm made in and used it once, and the ammunition has to be made in then they can't get it transported in some big state. That's big. Once you get it, better not get caught in a battle with the damn thing. I don't believe that. I don't think that. I don't think it's specified. Like an AK-47. I think it was any firearm made in
I always ask a lot of questions.
I bet you can.
Hey, I'm all about that corporal punishment. You know, capital punishment are really
I know I'm not that smart.
We have 24.
Yeah.
a sign that we gotta go.
Until
Ken, thanks. Did you get your honorary? Did you get your honorary?
Yeah.
Okay, I did. Good speech, good discussion, yeah. I'll send you the evaluation.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
My pleasure to be here, I'll tell you.
We learned something.
That's my goal. I'll get this up on the web.
We have two valuable things in our health, our time, and our relationship. And I spent my time very well today.
That's a very high compliment, sir. I agree with that completely. I just spent some time ill, so I can appreciate it all more.
Honest man.
Here you are, dear heart. Here.
Take that number.
This is for you.
Good for you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'll bring that back in September.
You don't understand who I am.
If you're the smartest,
If you're the smartest man in the world, here's the best part.
Very, very good. Enjoyed it immensely.
thank you very much. Higher praise I can pay.
How much we all know.
I'm not allowed on the computer.
Why not?